He was called the most trusted man in America. But in 1968, with a single television broadcast, Walter Cronkite, the calm, steady voice, millions invited into their homes every night, said something that would shake the nation to its core. Some say that night ended the Vietnam War. Others say it destroyed America's faith in victory forever. The truth about what really happened behind that broadcast is far more shocking than the myth we've been told. Walter Cronkite wasn't just a journalist. He was the journalist, a man whose words carried more weight than any politician's, whose voice defined truth for a generation. When he said something, America believed it. That's why, when Cronkite returned from Vietnam in 1968 and told the nation the war was unwinnable, it sent shockwaves through every living room, every newsroom, and yes, even the White House. President Lyndon B. Johnson reportedly turned to his aides and said, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America." But was that moment really the turning point that ended the Vietnam War, or just a story history wanted to believe? To understand the magnitude of that broadcast, you have to remember what America was like in 1968. The country was fractured, angry, and tired. The Vietnam War had already taken the lives of tens of thousands of young soldiers, and the nightly news was filled with images of chaos and death. Cronkite, known for his even tone and journalistic restraint, had been skeptical of opinion-based reporting his entire career. But after witnessing the devastation in Vietnam firsthand, the senseless bombings, the moral confusion, the sheer futility of the fight, he knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. On February 27, 1968, he delivered what would become one of the most famous broadcasts in American history. Sitting behind his CBS desk with that iconic calm voice, Cronkite said, "It is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate. Not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy." Those words cut deep. They shattered the illusion that victory was still possible. Millions of Americans who had once supported the war now began to question everything. It wasn't just another news report, it was a national reckoning. But the truth is, Cronkite didn't single-handedly end the Vietnam War. The country was already at a breaking point. The Tet Offensive had just erupted, exposing the gap between the government's optimistic reports and the brutal reality on the ground. Soldiers were losing faith, protests were erupting across campuses, and even within the Pentagon, morale was collapsing. Cronkite didn't start the fire. He simply said out loud what America was already feeling, but too afraid to admit. And that's what made his words so powerful. Yet even decades later, the legend persists that one man, one broadcast, turned the tide of history. But what few know is that Cronkite himself never claimed that power. He saw himself as a messenger, not a hero. In private letters, he admitted he agonized over that decision, terrified that expressing his opinion would blur the line between journalist and advocate. "I'm just a reporter," he once said. "I tell people what I see. They decide what it means." But in that moment, America decided it meant everything in the years that followed. The war dragged on for 7 more painful years. Johnson chose not to seek re-election. Public trust in the government crumbled. And the American media began to realize its own strength and its limits. Cronkite's broadcast didn't end the war, but it ended something else: the age of blind faith in authority. It marked the moment the press stopped echoing power and started challenging it. And that, perhaps, was his greatest legacy. Walter Cronkite remained haunted by Vietnam for the rest of his life. He continued to speak about the dangers of misinformation, of leaders who lied, and of journalists who forgot their duty to the truth. In one of his last interviews, he said quietly, "The truth hurts, but the lie kills." And maybe that's why his Vietnam broadcast still echoes through history, not because it ended a war, but because it reminded America that truth, once spoken, can never be taken back.